Our next step type is a for your information step. Notice how I can click on the object itself and change its name. Now, if I go into the properties here by double clicking, I'm going to take you through the various options you have here. We can either send it to a specific user and type in the name, and I can check the name, that's a very useful feature, or I could click on to and select from a list of users, or I could go and create a role. Now, a role is about creating a placeholder for a user that you wish to send a message to, but you don't yet know at the start of the flow who that user is going to be. So, for example, it could be a supervisor of a process or a number of users, and you may have a number of supervisors, and as this is a general flow, you don't know who that's going to go to yet. So let's create a new role. Notice how we have an originator, and that's very useful to send confirmations to, so you have to select the role and then tick it in the box to select it. Notice you have some other options. These options are available through Microsoft Exchange and are Exchange roles, but these are only available if you actually complete these under the Exchange Management server. And I'll show you now how to create a new role. Click on the star, enter a title for the role, and a prompt for the role. This is similar to asking questions when you interactively launch a flow. Alternatively, if you programmatically start a flow, then you can programmatically update these roles. As I said, they're placeholders for recipients where you don't know who the recipient is at the start of the flow. Notice that that's automatically selected. And see how it's been put in. We can have more than one user going in here. I do need to fill in a subject. And we can be as specific as we like on this. Then we actually have the message text. Now this message text can be as short or as long as you wish, and you can also modify this by changing the font, by making it bold, italic, underline, changing the colour, and changing whether it's justified, centralized, or right justified. Our advice is to keep this simple, as different machines may not have the same capabilities from one recipient to another. We can also change the importance, low, normal or high, away from the default that we set up in the options, and we can also allow or restrict the users from access to the flow. You'll see later from prior step button is very useful if you want to enforce a caseworker where the caseworker is implicitly an operator who processed the flow in an earlier step. Delivery for this workflow, we're not going to do anything terribly complicated. We're just going to use a default and send the full task message to the recipients. But remember, we could send the task to workflow, or as a URL, or as an XML document, or email a task message as text to the recipient. The ability to email a task message as text to the recipient is only available for FYI type steps. Prerequisites dictate why and how a task moves from one step to another step. These are known as conditions. These conditions can either be very simple or can involve multiple recipients voting, or a complicated combination of ands or ors. Normally, we don't need to manually fill this in, but we use a designer tool to do this for us. I'll show you how this works. Notice here we have no condition available. I'm going to press OK, and I'm going to use the designer screen to join the first step to the second step. Now straight away you can see that I've got a done condition. That is actually dictating what the prerequisite is to go from here to here. But when I go over the condition, I have a little cycle icon. If I left mouse click, I can cycle through the various options. Either the step is completed, or we responded yes, not known, or no to the question that was asked when we launched the flow, or we could be handling step execution errors, after step script failed, or an exception. I'm going to use the example of we've selected yes from the question. Now if I go back in to the prerequisites, the condition has been completed for us, and the screen that we're using has actually changed. Prerequisites can become quite complex quickly in larger flows, so it's worthwhile organizing the flow such that these conditions remain simpler rather than more complex, as debugging can be difficult for operators later on. You'll see this feature add another condition when we look at the response step. Now going to the Forms tab, we are going to use the default iStream form that comes out of the box. However, notice what we've got options for. A legacy option for message class, which allows us to use Outlook custom forms, which are provided by Microsoft, or iStream Pro Form custom forms, which we can create ourselves, which you'll see in the advanced module, or as you saw before when we were looking at the options, a web form or a custom HTML or ASP. Scripts and data I'm going to move over. Press OK to accept the changes.